Hello, welcome to the Feature Film Podcast. This week we are talking about Jovitos and ophidiophobia.
Enjoy the show!
Hello, welcome back. My name is Ethan.
And I'm Kyler.
And welcome to the Feature Film Podcast. Today...
Episode 2, man.
Episode 2. I'm so excited.
Bro.
And if you actually recall from our last episode, for those who have been following us on Instagram and all of our social media platforms, Kyler lost the game last time. Who said it? And the punishment is...
Unpopular movie opinions.
Unpopular movie opinions. And because Kyler lost, he has to give his unpopular opinion. And I pray that y'all just rip into him on social media because I want him to cry on this one.
Man, okay, so unpopular movie opinion. Everyone's gonna hate me because of this. It's no one agrees with me probably. If there is someone who agrees with me, please support me. Please
don't. Just rip
no.
into.
Okay, I actually don't think Jar Jar Binks is a bad character.
Okay.
I like him in the movies.
Yeah, that's unpopular.
I can't no one likes that.
Yeah, I know. Misha,
exactly. I know everyone thinks it's really stupid, his character, but I mean, he is the comedic relief, just like R2 or C-3PO would have been. And honestly, he has a pretty integral role in how the Empire was started.
Well, I know what movie I'm going to watch now. I'm going to pay more attention to.
So in episode 2, Padme had to go away for protection, and Jar Jar had to take her place because he was the only other Naboo representative. He ends up starting the vote to give the Chancellor emergency powers to create the clone army, which eventually killed all the Jedi.
So Jar Jar Binks was in charge. Not in charge, but
he represented the entire planet of Naboo.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's enough of the unpopular movie.
Yeah,
opinion,
it's an unpopular
but
movie.
But that's
opinion.
pretty unpopular.
I think he's funny.
Sure.
I think it was a good use of the character overall, and I know that people don't like me for that, so I'm sorry.
All right. Well, this week on the Feature Film Podcast, we are talking about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
This is a Kyler favorite.
What a movie.
Oh my gosh. It was actually pretty good. I had to cram it in my busy schedule. By the time I was done, it was 2 a.m. and I was exhausted. I could barely even write any notes, but it was still a good movie and I was awake for the entire thing.
Yeah, I hit about 2 a.m. and I had to stop and I had to finish the last half of it the next day. But man, so okay, the reason we said Jovitos and ophidiophobia in the beginning, so the Jovitos were a part of the beginning of the film, kind of a minor role. They were like the bad guys that were chasing Indy away from his previous adventure. And then ophidiophobia is actually the fear of snakes. And if you know anything about Indiana Jones, he hates snakes. He says it in the first 5 minutes of the film.
And he says it
constantly. I hate snakes, Jack. I hate them.
Throughout the entire movie, you just hear Indiana Jones just scream, oh my gosh. And then there's that one scene toward the end to where, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, to where they find the Ark and they're thrown into the pit with just covered in snakes. And it almost looks like Indy had to be more of a get over his fear than Miriam did, if you recall. Because Miriam's just screaming, oh my gosh. Which is a whole nother thought that I'll talk about later. But all the little subtle details, Kyler, I noticed, I know that you know all the little bits.
I pick up on things.
Yeah, what all things did you pick up on?
So, well, the reason I pick up on things, I went to school for broadcast, but I've been focusing on film and video and production and stuff like that. And so, I'm gonna geek out for a second for everyone who's listening. If you don't like film stuff, just skip ahead. If you just want to hear our thoughts about stories, if you don't want to hear about film stuff, go find a different podcast. But I'm gonna geek out about the actual shots in the film for a second. So throughout the entire film, I noticed this trick they did was in important parts they would show, instead of showing the people doing an action, they would show the shadow of the people doing an action. Like when Indiana Jones goes to Marion's bar, you don't see him go into the bar. You see his shadow appear on the wall, and she is in the foreground. So you see her, and you see her see his shadow. And it's a gigantic black shadow, too, signifying that he just showed up, And she turns around, she's like, what the crap are you doing here? That same thing happens again later when Sala and Indy are taking the Ark out of the Well of Souls. They are moving it, and you don't see them move it, but you see their shadows on the wall move it.
I didn't even consider that. Like when I was watching through the movie, I was just more amazed by the basket of it because I love theology. I like basic, the theology behind the story, and just watching the Ark of the Covenant and just watching, the glowiness. I was more fascinated by that, and I was too amazed. So I didn't
The
really
glowiness, the way they made like the Ark itself look, or like.
Yeah, which I would have never picked up on those details. I think it's just more because I was more fascinated with the more theology part of it. And
what theology?
Just so I'm doing, a Bible reading plan right now, and I just finished, or I'm about to start reading through the book of Exodus, but I just finished Genesis, and you hear all the things, like the Ark of the Covenant goes throughout, not even, like it goes beyond that. It goes way beyond that, and I'm not even there yet because that is in the book of Exodus.
You mean beyond the book of Exodus?
Yeah, it goes beyond the entire Bible, and it's interesting. Obviously, it's a fiction, which kind of makes
Indiana Jones is.
Well, yes, and even some of the, I guess, foretelling of the Ark of the Covenant was also, there's some things that at least I haven't read yet, which I have to go back and rewatch. But I was very fascinated with, like, I don't know, just the overall Ark of the Covenant. I think they did a very good job having a good representation of it, but almost
of how it looked in the film.
But also, I believe, you see, when it comes to like Bible things and stuff like that, it's people overglorify things. Like you look at all the famous pictures of Jesus. Jesus is like holier than thou. He's floating. He's like an innocent lamb.
Oh, okay.
But in reality, he's just an average Joe, just like you. Like he looks. I'm not saying he is, but he looks like an average Joe, just like you and me.
Okay, so you like how they kept to how it's actually described in the Bible?
How it's described in the Bible, but I do believe that they overglorified it just a little bit.
I actually don't think so.
Yeah.
After all the times I've read like how the Ark was created, it seems like a pretty accurate representation. Why do you think they overglorified it?
Just because when they open it up, it's like it's an abyss universe, and it's like, and it's shine, like not even just shiny, it's emitting light.
Okay.
And you see all the, like toward the end again, spoiler alert, when everyone dies, when they open the
Ark and everyone dies.
When they open the Ark, it's like you just see all these like ghosts and spirits, which.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. Okay, so I agree it is overglorified in a way, like over-exaggerated.
But it was very good, though.
Effective for the movie.
It was very good to show off its power, because I believe the Ark does have power. I believe that. Like, I have to, again, continue reading through the Bible, because I have a lot to learn. But it is actually, I think it's accurate on the power. I think it's inaccurate by how it looks. Does that make sense? Yes,
I understand what you're saying now. What I think, though, is one, you got to remember, like, these people, it's George Lucas and Steven Spielberg who made the movie. Lucas considers himself like a Buddhist Methodist. He's not a Christian. Now, he's obviously researched how the Ark looks. He has some kind of background in Christian faith, at least, so he understands a little bit of it. But I think what they did, and I'm going to get into this in how the story affected me a little bit later, but it's a comic book.
Yeah.
And what they decided to do with it was really make it a source of mystery and power more than a theological correct thing, which it's a blockbuster kind of movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They have to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, it was actually really effective. A really cool idea of this object with insane power that everyone wants,
To quote, what's his name? Belloc.
Belloc.
He was like, I think he said it's a radio.
For talking to God.
Yeah. Which, again, I have to go back, like, reread, but I don't think that's it at all.
All right, Bible lesson, everybody. Sorry. Not sorry, but like...
We're diving
Bible
into
lesson.
the Bible.
We're going into here. We're going this way. If you read the Bible in the Old Testament, when they tell how first the tabernacle, which is like the tent of God, was set up in the wilderness as the Israelites were roaming around for 40 years, like you see that there is the like outer court, and then there's the holy place, and then there's the Holy of Holies, the most holy place.
I think where only the priests could go.
The priests can only go there once a year on the Day of Atonement, which is it's a special day where the priest sacrifices animals and asks God for the forgiveness of the sins of all of Israel, which is like a million, 2 million people. It's an insane thing because they get one day a year where they can do that. Mm-hmm. And that in the most holy place is where the Ark of the Covenant is kept. That's where the presence of Almighty God sits, in that one spot on earth that's probably not even as big as a living room. It's a very small place, and what's inside the Ark is actually the 10 Commandments. I don't remember if they were the first ones that God gave, like the first stone tablets or the second stone tablets.
According to the movie, because I was paying attention to that, he says the broken pieces of the 10 Commandments.
Okay, so there's the broken pieces of the 10 Commandments in there, and then there is Aaron's staff that bloomed, and then there is a jar of manna, I believe, that they put in the Ark of the Covenant, and I can't remember why, but I mean, the Ark itself was not how they talked to God. They didn't go to the Ark to pray. I believe like they would pray in the general direction of the Ark because, I mean, that's where God's presence was.
Well, one thing that I think after Belloc said that, and he says something really clever and really unique. I think he says, like, if you want to talk, like,
let's go see him together.
Yeah, let's go see him together.
I've got nothing better to do. So,
and then he pulls a gun on him.
And it's actually, you know what, I didn't even think about that at the time, but that's actually a really interesting theological difference that they both had. That probably has nothing to do with the actual story overall, but it's interesting to think, like, Belloc thinks he can use the Ark to talk to God, quote unquote, even though that's not what he's really trying to do. I mean, Belloc is excavating the Ark for Hitler.
Yeah.
To use against the world. And they kind of set that up earlier in the movie where they... because, you know, the Israelites would carry the Ark out in front of them into battle, or at least with them into battle, as, like, showing, hey, God is with us. Now, there's another story. There's more stories about that in the Bible. If you want to look into that, it didn't always work out because they didn't have the right heart about it. That's a different subject. But that's what they used in the movie as this Ark will give whatever army holds it the power. They're using it as a weapon, not as a real, like, hey, let's get close to God, you know?
Which, now that you bring it up, it's interesting because you think about people, like in Bible times, people died, like you just said, because of the heart, like they tried to use the Ark for the wrong reasons, which I think is just what you said just now, but I think that's fascinating. And if you look at, again, spoiler alert, the end of the movie, they just wanted a peek of the Ark. Everyone died.
Yeah. Everyone who looked
died. That's just an interesting point.
Yeah. Definitely an interesting, I don't know if like Alfred Hitchcock coined the term MacGuffin, and it's something that starts the plot. It's just a plot device. Mm-hmm. And I think that the Ark as a whole is an interesting MacGuffin. It's an interesting plot device. It's just something that doesn't come up now, you know? Mm-hmm. It's not, movies aren't made around that kind of stuff now.
Yeah.
And that's, again, something that I'm going to get more into when I talk later about how the story affected me. But, so yeah, that's our little geek out session.
I think...
Bible study.
Yeah, I know, we kind of just trailed off there.
That's okay.
I'm a big Bible nerd. And then Kyler likes to watch all, like, these movies. They're so... And I just think it's cool and how they both related. Yeah. But I think the overall story is great. You look at Indiana Jones and you look at how he was introduced into the story itself. Like, literally, you're introduced, and it is a mini adventure of his. He goes, and you are introduced with a man and a whip and a fedora. And it's a typical good, bad guy adventure, like a little chase scene. And he's going in, and he's with a gentleman, and he's doing booby traps. He's passing all the puzzles and all the things. And, you know, you have the iconic scene of him switching the idol for the bag, and it doesn't work anyway, and then the boulder comes out of nowhere. And as it goes, he gets betrayed. That didn't last the other guy too far. And this is all within 5 minutes. Like, he goes, he gets betrayed. He makes his daring escape, escaping the boulder. And then all of a sudden, the bad guy comes. You hit, literally, the good guy, the bad guy, and the climax. And then you get to see this, like, going with the Javitos. And it's just this one big grand getaway to the plane where he's screaming out, "Start the plane!
Yeah.
Start the plane!" And then he just goes. And I just think that's a good way to introduce Indiana Jones because you see all sides of him. You see, and then immediately going in, like the following scene, he's a professor at a college. So you learn.
What a day job.
It's so fast. Like it was so like yeah. It's like archaeologist by day, professor by day, archaeologist by night. You know, and what was really I love and how they like it's not like Casablanca at all. With Casablanca, it took an eternity to figure out what was going on. But when in this movie they just throw it at you immediately. Even the bad guy for the entire movie that we're watching itself, he was the bad guy within the first 5 minutes. He's going to be the bad guy for the next 2 hours. And I just think it was really cool on how you just know Indiana Jones by that point. You already have like an emotional connection with them. And then you go on to the later scenes and you already know what he's thinking. You already know his action. You already know his gameplay. Just be within the first 5 minutes. And I think that was a great way to introduce his character.
Absolutely. If you listeners out there want to listen to a different podcast that kind of goes a little bit into a different side of the filmmaking, into the soundtrack, the music of it all, go check out a show called The Soundtrack Show by David W. Collins. It's on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, probably Spotify too. And it does a really good job of explaining the music and how the music tells the story of Indiana. Like his Raiders theme, it tells the story of Indiana, and he goes into that. He also talks about how this movie starts in the middle of the previous adventure. You know, you get to see the end of it, and it launches you into the next one as well. Kind of like he said it was more of like a old TV serial where at the end of the episode it's a cliffhanger, and then the next episode picks up at the cliffhanger and keeps going into the next story. That's exactly what it did, and it's genius. What I thought it was more of a comic book, which I love. I love it so much because there's so many like tropes that you see throughout the film that are comic book-y, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, first off, the overglorification of the Ark, you know, is this mysterious relic with unimaginable power.
It's a gold relic, though, not a red relic.
It's not a red relic, not a production either.
Sorry, I had to throw a pun in there as well.
But, like, there are a couple shots within the movie, like, the bad guy that is all dressed in black the entire time, that you first meet at Marion, and then you later see him in Egypt with Belloc. His name is actually Mr. Toht. It's T-O-H-T.
Belloc Toht?
No. Or the guy in the black hat.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
who ended up having the burned hand.
The German.
Yeah, the German guy. His name is Mr. Toht.
Okay.
Toht is, I believe it means death. Oh, so his name is Mr. Death, but you never hear his name in the film.
That's so
He's
interesting.
just there. He's just a bad guy.
It's funny because Lucasfilms actually, like, George Lucas, he always likes to throw in like little hidden meanings within everything. Oh, yeah. Look at the famous Darth Vader. It literally, Vader in German means father.
Yeah.
So it means Darth Father, which is a big spoiler to saying, Luke, I am your father.
Right.
And what did you say Toht meant? It meant death,
Mr.
which
Death.
is a very accurate representation of who that character was. Now, granted, he wasn't really a big part of the movie, but as he was walking, like, everything he was, it represented his name.
Yeah.
Even though you don't even hear his name.
Right. Now, what's interesting, like, about him, when you see him the first time, you don't even realize you see him, but it's when Indiana gets on a plane to go to Nepal to meet Marion, and you just see Indiana sit down, and then it cuts to this other guy who's reading a magazine, and you see the magazine like move down a little bit, and his eyes just peek out. He's just like staring at Indiana, and then the magazine goes back up to hide his face again. And I mean, that's something I'd see in a comic book. Whenever they're in Cairo, and there's the man with the eye patch and the monkey, he sneaks into Salah's house and has this little red bottle and just pours liquid on top of these dates, and it's poison. You don't even have to see the bottle, see a label or anything. It's a red bottle. It's poison. It just makes sense. The only other color it could be would be black, and the scene is too dark for it to be black. So it's just those little things that stick out to you as story points of like, oh, it's a red bottle. It's got to be bad. You know, it's just something intuitive that you see and you know. When Mr. Toad looks up from his magazine and goes back down, you know something sneaky's going on.
And you know he's the bad guy.
Exactly. Like, it's such a comic book good versus evil kind of thing, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved it so much. It's an adventure story, you know? It makes me want to have my own adventure.
Which, actually, it's kind of funny because when me and Kyler decided to make a podcast, we were traveling down to Houston, Texas. And
really?
Yeah.
Was that what
it was, we were talking about it. It was an idea.
Okay.
And we were traveling down to Houston, Texas, and, you know, he's driving, I'm sitting in the seat, and he's like, you want to listen to a podcast? I'm like, sure. And I don't, what was it?
It was Blockbuster.
It was,
Shout out to frickin' Blockbuster podcast. Guys, okay, if you love Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you need to go listen to this podcast. I cannot frickin' get enough of this. They only have one season. It's 6 episodes. They're working on season 2 right now, but it tells the story of how Lucas and Spielberg made their blockbusters in the 70s and 80s.
And it's a very good...
You have to go listen to it. Have to. Go support them. If you donate to them, like even $10, you get their whole podcast in the highest quality available. Like, frick. I love it.
It's a good
so
podcast.
much. Original music. And it's not just us two. It's not just two guys talking. It is what they call a biopod. It's like an old radio drama where there's voice actors and sound effects, and you need to go listen to it.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting podcast. I need to go back and re-listen to some of it. But one of the things we did listen to was Indiana Jones. And one thing I think you've basically covered so far was the ones that we listened to. And
that was the Soundtrack Show podcast, actually.
Was it the soundtrack?
That one was the Soundtrack Show. Who cares?
Yeah, we're just glorifying all these podcasts.
Shout out to Blockbuster Pod. Seriously, but shout out to Soundtrack Show, too. They are my favorites.
Soundtrack was pretty good, though. Like, it gave a lot of, like, insight to things that I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Like, George Lucas, you know how he's famous for the orchestra. You're, like, literally look at Star Wars, look at Indiana Jones, look at all these other movies that he made. And literally everything has a meaning. Everything. And it's cool to see, like, all right, well, there's going to be this one movie to where, or not movie, there's this one song that plays when Indiana Jones looks at Miriam, or when Indiana Jones enters into a room, or if Indiana Jones is just in a cave, it'll always play, like, a certain, song, and it'll get you right, like, you already know. And I think that's what's so clever about all these, like, what's so clever about George Lucas and all of his movies, is that that's one thing I'm so fascinated, because with the beginning, you already knew everything. Like, you knew Indiana Jones, like, I feel like really well, because he does such a good job. And it's not even just like, all right, well, here's a good story. It's so much more beyond that. It's like, it's the music, it's the lighting, it's like the atmosphere, it's the facial expressions, it's everything that you can imagine just thrown together. And that's what we were listening to when we were heading down to Houston. And that's one reason why I'm excited for episode 2. Because
shout out to the feature film podcast.
Shout out
episode 2. Oh man,
I just really like this movie. It's really good, and hopefully we can do more Indiana Jones in the future. But you know, we'll get more of a variety in the meantime. But it's really good.
So I'm gonna give how the story overall affected me.
Yeah.
My overall statement when I come away from this movie, this is what I think. I think that the fact that it is told as almost a comic book type story, it makes me want to have my own adventure.
Okay.
Until I realize how much work an adventure is. Because you're just watching this movie, like, it's fun. You want to get in there with Indy, and you're cheering him on the whole time, and you're thinking to yourself, like, man, I could totally go do that. And then you realize how much crap he goes through. And it's still fun, which is awesome. I think it really does awaken that sense of, like, desire for almost freedom in a way, and adventure in life.
Yeah.
You know?
It's good.
So that's how the story affected me.
With me personally, I would say somewhere along those lines, because, you know, I'm class of 2019 out of high school. So I'm still kind of fresh. It's only my first year of college isn't even done yet. And I feel like I'm already being tied down by life. I'm already, like, in college. I'm already working full time, and I'm already like trying to keep up with life. And like nothing's set in stone yet, but I want to travel. I want to do things out in the real world, and that's something that I pulled out from it. Going with what you said is just making like, oh, I can do that. Well, not necessarily do that, but I can go out and do things and make a difference and have my own adventure.
Yeah. You know what? I agree. And that's kind of what I was thinking of. I was like, man, like, how do I have my own adventure? You know, like,
yeah.
And I kind of went with the more spiritual aspect of it. Like,
yeah.
you know, when we talked about the Bible earlier on this podcast. If you don't know this, listeners, both me and Ethan are Christians, and it made me like go to God in prayer and say like, Lord, I want to have an adventure with you. Like, I know that you will provide that, and not in an Indiana Jones type way, but I mean, with God, life becomes an adventure. Mm-hmm. Especially because he has a mission that you're supposed to be on anyway. So,
there's actually a sermon that, because I've been thinking about doing, it's actually the movie. I feel like the timing of this movie was really good because I've been kind of thinking about it. I just got back from my vacation and, you know, talking about traveling and all this other stuff. And I came back and I didn't want to go back to work. I didn't want to go back to school. And my mom was listening to a sermon and I walked up to her, and it's actually a friend of ours' grandfather. His wife just recently passed away. Oh, no. But she lived her life. She was older. He's actually pretty well known. I think his name, correct me if I'm wrong, is Tony Evans.
Oh no, I didn't.
But not the radio station guy. He's an African American
pastor.
Yeah, pastor.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Oh yeah, he's a grandfather to one of our friends.
Oh no.
And one thing that he said that really stood out to me, and it makes me want to do it, is, you know, make a plan. You know, people say, you know, I make a plan, God ruins it. No, make a plan, but allow God to have the edit button, enable editing. So it's like,
have the ability to rewrite the plan.
Have him be able to rewrite the plan. Okay. So my plan is to go out to the world and do things that I need to do, and I have a passion for it, but I'm going to have him change it if he needs to.
Yeah.
Because if he's not there, then you're just out there alone and stuck.
Yeah.
Not like God will leave you, but he will, you know, it's not really, you see what I'm saying?
If you're not in God's will, I mean, he still allows you to do things, obviously, but it's not going to be the best place for you, is what you're saying.
And I think with this period in life, it's always good to follow what God has for us. Yeah. So that's what I got from the story.
Heck yeah.
It was good. It was a very good movie, and I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend watching.
Just gives you, you know, a couple hours to relax too.
Oh yeah, exactly. And
it's one of those mindless movies, you know.
Lately, I've been just watching movies. I just recently watched all Kung Fu Pandas.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I went on a kick recently of just movies that I've never watched. So I watched like Terminator and Jaws, and I think I even watched The Matrix for the first time.
I didn't see those. I haven't seen.
Okay, by the way, I heard they're coming out with Matrix 4, which is insane because it's like 20 years later apparently. In real life, like it's been a while since these movies were finished, and so. Anyway, that's a conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
But, so that's how the story affected us this week. Now, welcome to the part of the show where we do our game. This week, we're going to do a game called Rewrite. Last time it was Who Said It. This time it's Rewrite. So, Ethan has picked a point of the movie where we're going to begin to rewrite it and come up with a completely different ending. So I'm going to turn it over to Ethan.
All right. Well, this week was a little hard because I looked hard into Indiana Jones, and a lot of it ended the same way. It was what happens if Indy lost the Ark, what happens if they lost the Ark, what happens if this, what happens that, and it always ended the same way, which is them opening the Ark no matter what. But with a little help from Kyler, I actually found a pretty good point, and that was when Indy bluffed to blow it up.
And what we're going to do, Ethan's going to give how he would rewrite it, and I'm going to give how I'm going to rewrite it, and we're going to see how close we can get to each other's rewrite.
Well, if I'm being honest, this was I just made it really short, really sweet, really simple, but I can go into it a little bit more. But in this rewrite, he blows it up.
Okay.
And the spirits or whatever get released and kills everyone right then and there. And then it shuts. Many years later, people find it, and then they put it in a museum.
So did Indy die?
Oh yeah.
Everyone on that
died.
island when he blew up the Ark, everyone died.
That's
Holy
what
crap.
that's what I'm guessing. All right. Like if he blew it up, that's what would have happened. I'm pretty sure of it.
Okay.
What do you think?
Okay, cool. Well, mine is a little bit more in depth.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I know.
it's you're right. It still ends with someone opening the Ark. So this. I'm gonna read it to you right now. What I wrote. All right. Indy fires the rocket, not at the Ark, but at the group of Nazis that were off to the side. In the confusion from the blast, the Nazis scramble to regroup, but are surprised by Captain Katanga and his crew of pirates that came to help Indy. Katanga saves Marion from the Nazis, and Belloc escapes. Jones and his pirate friends grab the Ark, take it back to Katanga's boat. They travel to America, where Marcus Brody, his friend from the college, meets Indy, Marion, and the Ark to take it into the museum that Indy always sells things to. Now, Belloc steps off the boat. He had escaped. He had hidden on Katanga's boat, and he steps off the boat from where he is hiding, pulls a gun, and starts shooting at Indy, Marion, and Marcus. They all run for cover. They're hiding. Belloc approaches the Ark and begins to open it. Indy shouts a warning, like, "Don't do that. You don't know what's going to happen." And Belloc does it anyway. Then the power of God shoots out, blows Belloc up, and then the Ark shuts, and all of them, like, peek out from their hiding spots. Belloc's gone. There's just this mess on the ground from where he was standing, and the Ark is shut. Everything's fine. So then they take it to the museum,
And then they put
and
it
stays there forever.
in the storage area.
No, just
The museum?
The museum. Never goes to Area 51. Never gets to the American government. It just ends up in the museum. The end.
Wow, what a good story. Mine, that was a lot better than mine. I just said he blew it up and
Everyone died.
everyone died. All right.
Good job.
Good job.
So guys, tell us what you thought about our rewrites. Who is the better rewriter?
We'll have a vote in our Instagram poll.
Exactly.
Just make sure to stay tuned to Red Relic Productions on our Instagram page.
Yep. And now we're going to do our after credit scene, as we call it, where we play a clip from next week. So Ethan, you want to count us down for the clip?
Alrighty. 3, 2, 1, roll film.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Alrighty, thank you for tuning in with us this week. I hope next time y'all will just enjoy it just as much as we did.
Oh, you know what? Before we go, I have to point this out because I made a big deal about it in Casablanca episode, and we have to do this. So when in Casablanca, you know, we were really confused the whole time because they didn't tell each other's names. They didn't like state the names right out. They stated the names of Indy and Belloc in the first 5 minutes of the film. I'm letting everyone know. It made it a whole lot simpler to follow. So
For sure.
Be like Indiana Jones. Anyway, that's a wrap. We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Alrighty.
Roll credits.
Hello, how are you doing today, Kyler? This
I'm
is
doing
Ethan.
Great, man. This
All
is
right.
Kyler.
This
Let's
is
start
Kyler.
that. Let's do that again.
Try that again. I just didn't know how to just dive right in.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Oh,
Here,
sure.
just do this.
You should have.
Exactly.